Okay, so today with us, we have Jason Casebolt. He is the Director of Product Development Quality at the Boeing Company with the Commercial Airplanes Division. And he's from the class of 1997. So he knows Mr. Williams very well, I think. They graduated around the same time frame. But Jason's going to tell us a little bit about his job today and where he's been and any advice he has for you guys. Feel free to, we'll have a point in the presentation when you can ask questions, which is perfect because it helps for him to know where you're coming from and hopefully he'll be able to answer any questions that you have. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey, I'll go ahead and share my screen here. Thanks so much, by the way. It's a pleasure for me to be able to speak with you all this morning. It's wonderful to give back to such an important community that's been such just amazing in my life. And so I'll just kind of start off here. You can see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. So as she mentioned, my name is Jason Casebolt, former Carroll student, permanent Carroll alumni. I'm going to talk a little bit about, just for context, about my company, a little bit about what I do with the company, then I'll turn the corner into my educational and career history and some questions and answers for the students. Along the way, I might have some cool photos here and there. And what you see on the screen is actually an aircraft we haven't even built yet. And so that's the truss brace wing demonstrator. Just this year in my department, NASA provided a lot of funding to Boeing to basically create 2 experimental aircraft with different types of wings that may dramatically increase fuel efficiency and reduce emissions in the future. And so we're really excited about the truss brace wing demonstrator there. So I work at the Boeing Company, and Boeing is huge, and it's been around for a long time. And so it was founded a little bit more than 100 years ago near the Seattle area in Washington State. It produces both military aircraft and commercial aircraft. I mostly work with just the commercial aircraft division, like the passenger jets and the freighters. But we also have a military division that makes some really cool defense articles, different types of helicopters. One of the commercial variants that we make is actually a 737 passenger plane that we work with our military side on to make it something that can patrol and protect the coasts. That's the P-8 Poseidon that I'm pretty excited about. And through a series of mergers and acquisitions over the years, Boeing has merged or bought out other companies such as McDonnell Douglas, Hughes Aircraft, and others, just to become one of the biggest aerospace companies in the world. And so, as we like to say, it has a heritage that mirrors the history of flight itself. And so, if anybody's heard of Rosie the Riveter, kind of a popular pop culture icon, Rosie the Riveter has her roots in Boeing during World War II, and just a lot of great things to say about the history of the company. Itself, it has a little bit over $60 billion in revenue last year, working with about 12,000 suppliers, more than 150,000 employees. It's big and it's everywhere. In fact, if you are over by Wright State on the highway there, I think on the 670, there's actually a building there that you'll see a Boeing logo on over by Wright State. And so I've had to go in there just once or twice over the years. I don't normally have business there, but administratively, they can provide support if I'm in town. In my division, Boeing Commercial Airplanes, we make a lot of jets and we make big ones. And so everything from the smaller variants of the 737, you might take those from like Chicago to somewhere, they're more of the regional jets, all the way up to our largest one at the moment is the 777-9. And so those are usually a little bit more intercontinental, going like from here to Europe or other places. And so you see here that, you know, some of these are in a little bit less than 200 seats, all the way up to a little bit more than 400. So those are all the planes, a lot of cool stuff that we do. And what I really wanted to focus on is turning the corner here to the areas of high demand for talent. Because it's one thing to talk about all the stuff that we do, we need people to function. And every company right now they talk about the war for talent, the war for grads. I think as people coming out of a wonderful high school with a lot of skills, with a lot of potential, that you really get a chance to write your ticket for your own future. And so for people that are interested in Boeing, you see 6 categories there. I think I can have some thing at the bottom of my screen. I'm not sure if you can see that. But we have it from business, from everything from business operations to project management, managing different things to make them happen at the company, to finance, accounting, human resources. I started the first half of my career in supply chain management, working with suppliers all around the world. Cybersecurity is a big thing for those that like tech, like protecting things, like stopping bad things from happening. I'm not a cybersecurity expert myself, so that one I probably won't go that deep on. Data science and analytics, for the folks that like math and computers, this is for you. And so there's all sorts of cool things happening with data these days. And so we have the demand for it. We use data in about everything that we do. We use it with our customers. We optimize things. We find new insights. So a lot going on with data. Engineering. All sorts of engineering is occurring at Boeing. I currently work in quality engineering, but we have everything from aerospace engineering, industrial, mechanical, production engineering, structures, electronics, computer engineering, people that work with fluids, all kinds of really neat stuff happening in every possible sect of engineering is available. IT, information technology, and so that's a really big one with a lot of our enterprise IT systems, different applications. We've been deploying things almost like tablets in our factories to help people do their manufacturing jobs a lot better, and manufacturing. And so that's probably the area of our most critical need right now, is making sure we have enough people, skilled people that can actually build our planes and our products for us. And so a lot of demand there and a lot of opportunity. Here. Quality engineering is what I do. And I will say that it is probably to a good degree of certainty, none of you will be able to major in quality engineering in college because that's just not something that's offered. Sometimes some programs have a class or have one day of a class devoted to quality or quality engineering, but typically industry or companies have treated it as something that's on the job training, but there is a lot of skill to it. And so usually you have to start out as an engineer first and then migrate into quality engineering. So that's why it's a little more rare, or a lot of people don't know more about it. The photo there is, this is an aerial shot here of one of our 4 production lines for our 737 plane in Renton, Washington. We're trying to get to a point where we're rolling more than one of these out a day. And we've done it before, and kind of post-pandemic here, and as our production rates increase again, we'd love to get to something that's 2 a day. And so something the sheer size and volume of a plane, it's pretty fun. But for quality engineering, we really focus on our quality management system. And so there's some popular terms that we use in our industry, like AS9100, which is a certain type of a quality management system, or an ISO, International Standards Organization. It's a set of practices, techniques, and standards that companies have to go through to ensure that they have a good management system for controlling the quality of their product, making sure if anything happens to those products that we're fixing them ahead of time and that we're compliant to those. And so there's a lot on that, because something with the sheer size and volume of our planes and our operation, we need a high quality functioning quality management system to keep our products safe, to keep the flying public safe, and to make sure that we really pour our values into everything that we do. We also work a lot with product and process designs. So the products themselves are like the planes, but the processes might be how those planes come together. Certain types of attachments of the wings, or sealing our fuel tanks, or a lot of different things like that. Treating the metal so that flight after flight after flight in different altitudes, different pressures, things like that, that they remain safe. And so we do a lot of measurements, we do reviews, and then we go verify those to standards using tools and techniques. We also do a lot of product and process control, again, with tools, materials. We'll sample, we'll cut up things, we'll evaluate them. My strongest two areas are the bottom two. And so in quality engineering, it's a whole discipline, but some people gravitate towards certain sections of it. And for me, it's continuous improvement. Lean Six Sigma is about problem solving and efficiency, often with statistics. And root cause analysis are a set of techniques to make sure that you're finding the what's really causing a problem and that you're fixing it for good. And then the last part on here is the quantitative methods and tools. This gets back and it crosses over with like the data science that I mentioned earlier, about collecting data, doing statistical analysis on it, getting a lot of insights. There's a technique called statistical process control that's been around about 100 years itself, but being able to operationalize that now with like Bluetooth enabled measurement devices, using a lot of data science to scale that larger, it's pretty special. And then just doing a lot of product development, which is the department that I'm in now, design of experiments, trying out different things, collecting the statistics, seeing which options to solve problems are better. So do a lot of neat stuff there. And but it really started with the foundation of a lot of education and credentials here. And you see that Carroll's on there. And I went to high school at Carroll, loved it. A lot of great values there, great education, great community. After Carroll, I went to Ohio State University. Actually started my first year at Wright State, did that for a year and then transferred. And at Ohio State, I majored in finance with a minor in political science. After college, I moved out to Washington State. I'll get into that in the career slide here in just a moment. But while I was working full-time, Boeing and other companies have some really great tuition assistance or tuition programs. So Boeing has one called the Learning Together program, or the LTP. And Learning Together program, it's not a reimbursement program because you don't have to pay the tuition and then they reimburse you. LTP actually partners with schools and just pays the check for you if it's an eligible program. And so for 4 years in the evenings, while I worked full-time during the day, I went to law school at the Seattle University School of Law in downtown Seattle. And they were the only law school in the state of Washington that had a part-time law school or an evening-based law school. So I did that for 4 years, focused on litigation, contracts, and intellectual property. And it was a great experience. I later on got my bar license. That means I became a licensed attorney in the Washington State Bar Association. And then kind of a departure from my path there, I later reevaluated my skill set, what I had gaps in and what I wanted to learn. And I went back and I got a master's from MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And that is a very unique master's program that's a hybrid of an MBA, a business master's, and a systems engineering master's as well. And so I got both of those exposures in that program. It's a master's of science. And then after that, I went on to earn a lot of certifications in lean manufacturing, more efficient manufacturing, or Six Sigma from the University of Michigan. And I'd say that what's underneath all of this is that just the access to education these days through YouTube, through education websites like Coursera or the MIT, some of their open courseware or Udemy. There's so many things that you can find specialized applications, videos, things like that from. And so I'd encourage you all to just have a culture of learning and curiosity in your lives, and it'll take you a lot of great and special places. So we'll move on here to the next portion. So this is how that education kind of overlaps with my career here. So after graduating from Ohio State in finance in 2003, I had an opportunity to work at a kind of a real estate development company in Tacoma, Washington. I moved out to Washington. I thought it would be about a year project, and then I'd move back home. And then I started learning about Boeing. Boeing was out here, and so I decided to apply. And so using kind of my business background, I got into supply chain management, managing suppliers. And these suppliers were the type that would provide, if you thought of an aircraft as Legos, it'd be the big pieces of Legos. It'd be the big pieces that snap on that you see. And we call those structures. And so I worked with pretty much the equivalent of NASA in India. It was a supplier to Boeing, and I would travel over there. I would negotiate contracts. I would make sure that the quality of the parts that they were providing to Boeing were good, that they shipped on time, that we had the parts when we needed them to make our planes. And amazing experience. And while I was doing that, that's when I started law school at Seattle University. There, I did a lot of contract law, learning about contracts and negotiations. And so my job, I pivoted that to focus more toward being a contract negotiator. And I started doing that with the suppliers in India. And then I added South Korea on that as well. And so then you see here in my timeline, I'm continuing to be a contract negotiator. I finish up law school. I start getting to really specialized projects in China, and which was really neat, traveling to Beijing and some of the other cities to set up different collaborations. Boeing, as its size and a way of giving back, has a lot of niche programs. And so one way of giving back is I was able to do a job through Boeing for a few months called the Boeing United Way Loaned Executive Program. And that's a nomination program where you go and Boeing pays your salary while you go work with the United Way for a few months. And I did that, and it was one of my favorite experiences because you get to see the impact of a large company in the community and how the giving is associated with that. After I returned from there, I entered management. And so Boeing has both non-management career paths to become like a specialist or a technician in your field, or you can go the management, senior management executive route. And so I decided to go that route, and mine was on supply chain affordability, which means trying to find ways to reduce the cost in our supply chain through changing some of the designs or logistics of the situations. So later on, I continued, went into another management assignment, also regarding negotiations. And at that point in time, I really self-assessed, and I thought, I'm really specialized in contracts and negotiations. I built myself to be very specialized in that, but I want to well-round myself out technically. That was one of my weaker areas. And I thought that if I could become more versatile, that it would open up some different career options for me. And that is something that I had a few mentors that mentioned that as well. And so I applied and got into MIT. And there, I also did that program while I was working. They had virtual options through webcams. I would have to fly to the campus once a semester. And at the end of the program, I actually lived in the dorms there, in graduate dorms, for my final semester. But there, I worked in like quality program management, project management, and process management before leading the initial quality data science and business intelligence teams, where I would go recruit data scientists to do a lot of new kind of experimental things in the field of data and applying it to aerospace. And then I got into something called digital transformation, that's using a combination of technology and processes to radically change how we go about and doing a lot of operations at our company. From there, I took a leap of faith and I moved to Malaysia, and I ran one of Boeing's joint ventures that was at the Malaysia-Thailand border for a few years. I was the director of quality there, but then also temporarily led the entire site, worked in sales and contracts there as well. Quality was my primary purpose for being there though. And it was wonderful working with people from a different culture, finding a site, helping spread best practices, and really connect them with a lot of the methods that we used. It was a very fulfilling experience doing that, especially in another culture. During this time, while I was doing that, again, I went back to remote education with the University of Michigan to learn better ways of solving problems and bringing a lot of those methods to the team. Not everybody there in the local workforce had the opportunity to take a lot of these classes. And so if I could take similar type of knowledge and just share that with them, help implement it, we can make a huge difference, and we did. So then I moved back to the United States during, pretty much during the pandemic. And when I came back, I worked initially with quality improvement at our delivery centers, almost like the car sales showroom, where our customers show up and take delivery of their airplanes. And then I worked with the 737 MAX for a few years, being the head of their quality assurance for production, then moving over to working with efficiency, lean, and improvement. before getting into quality engineering that I explained earlier. After being in quality engineering, I then took responsibility for all of quality engineering in Boeing commercial airplanes, not just the 737, but also all models of production, which at the time included the 747, which we no longer produce, the 767, 777, and some other aspects. And then I moved to product development. That's more like research and experimentation for future aircraft. And that's where I became an executive director. And so that's kind of the whole career path from Carroll to Ohio State and everything in between. And one of the things that you see on here, in addition to just a lot of different jobs, is that the closeness of these dots really starts getting a lot closer later in my career. That's because you build that foundation early, and it takes a number of years, but then you can really start getting into a lot of different roles later on. And I think that probably the last main point I want to make before I open it up to the questions is that at a company like Boeing or other large companies, you could have a career that has drastically different jobs. And so for myself, I started working with suppliers and negotiating contracts, but there's so many different roles and opportunities like the United Way one I told you about and others, to where in one career, you can wear so many different hats. And just my personality style and type, I really enjoy that. And so that gives me something to look forward to. So I will go ahead and open it up to questions here. I hate showing up to something like this and doing all the talking. And so certainly let me know what's on your mind.
Jason, this is Mr. Williams. I didn't graduate in 1997, but I graduated in 98, and everybody knows I was a better class. And he's nodding his head at everybody. But Jason, can you talk about the importance of networking and the connections that you build at every step of the way and how that helped you?
Absolutely. People is probably the most important part of my job, and it comes with networking and connections. Books, videos, experts can teach you how to solve technical problems, but it's the networking, the relationships, and building those before you need them that's really important. So if I need to solve a problem, I can call a lot of people that I've made relationships with over the years, and they're willing to help me solve my problem. I'm willing to pay that forward and help them with their problems. And so I'm able to magnify my impact, not just with what I can do, but with the power of my network that can help me do it. And it takes time to build that. And I see a lot of people that only reach out to people when they need something. And so I'll get someone at work that'll reach out to me, they want to talk to me, and the first time they're talking to me, they go, "So what can you do for me? Can you give me a job?" I said, "Well, that's the wrong approach." And so it's build the relationships before you need them. And I'm an introvert. And so for me, I get a lot of my recharge. I charge my battery basically when I'm alone or just with a few people. Being in groups of people and things like that drains my energy. I've learned how to talk and do different things in public, and that's fine. But what I found is a lot of introverts, people like me, hate networking. They go, "Oh, it feels so forced." So they don't do it, and they kind of double down just in their books and their calculators, and they don't strengthen that people part of their lives, and it stops them from being even more effective and scaling out what they can accomplish. And so when I mentor, especially introverts, I say, hey, it's not about just going out there and rubbing elbows with everybody. You really have to find a way to connect with people in meaningful ways. And so for me, it's about finding maybe something you have in common or finding a legitimate purpose to talk to them about. It's not an ask, but just something in common. And so if you can do that and build your networks before you need them, then when you do, you can accomplish anything that you want to.
What type of maps are generally used in engineering? Like, is it?
Okay. So specifically, we will use things like process capability. You can look it up online. There's these different types of indices, and it's a way of using statistics that tell you whether or not your process is repeatable and in control, or whether you have some problems and where they may lead. We use statistical process control. It's also statistics. It's a lot of statistical based things. More recently, we use a lot more regression. And so you start getting into that predictive math with regression, and there's lots of different types. And so you have a whole bunch of variables. You can run them through the data science or the regression. It'll tell you which of those inputs are statistically significant and lead to outcomes. And regression is probably one of the most infamous of the predictive math. And so I love regression. It's great. Honestly, though, the majority of quality problems can be solved with simple math. And so if you're just going to do what they call a Pareto chart, where you stack up the thing that happens the most, then the second most, and the third most, there's a classic concept called the 80-20 rule, or usually 80% of your issues occur in 20% of the things that are happening. And so if you can just focus and prioritize, you can accomplish anything. But the things like statistics and regression, binary logistic regression, analysis of variation, all sorts of great statistics, I enjoy them all.
You've had such a great career with so many awesome experiences. What kind of advice would you give to a student trying to get to college who, to think about all the stuff you've done is probably maybe a little overwhelming? What kind of basic information can you give them?
Okay. Well, yeah, I swear that you're not a plant, but I have a slide on that. So let me go back to screen sharing here. There we go. And I'll pull this back up. I will hide that. There we go. Here's my parting advice. So one of the pieces on here is that it's never too late to be your best self. I will admit I was a B student at Carroll, and I had other priorities, you know, some people do. And I love the basic education foundation that I had there, a lot of the experiences. I certainly could have tried harder. And so I think I even had a C- at one point. So then I go to Ohio State. It took me 7 years to graduate. And I had a B+ average there, I'd say, at Ohio State. I had some classes, though, that I had to take 4 times. I dropped them, wasn't doing well. I had a C-, a D+ in one of those classes. And, you know, for me, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's on my permanent record. I'm going to be scarred forever. Well, you can still continue honing and becoming your best self. It's harder. I mean, you know, if you kind of succeed earlier on, it's always great to maintain that momentum instead of trying to rebuild it. But by the time I applied to law school, I already was working at Boeing. I had some career experience I could supplement my grades with, talk a little bit about, you know, working and going to school, which I did throughout college also. During my law school application, I did mention Carroll. Seattle University is a Jesuit Catholic institution. And so I talked a lot about the ideals and the spirit of giving back with that. And so I continued to hone. And when I graduated law school, I graduated with a high honors, magna cum laude. I started gaining momentum. I started learning to be better. I also wasn't as distracted by video games and sports at that point in my life. And then by the time I went to MIT, I was really focused. I felt really honed. I built a lot of my skills. And so MIT is on a 5-point grade point average. And so I was proud to graduate with a 5.0. It was very hard. But it's never too late to be your best self. Don't think that ship has sailed. You can continue building and always be better if you want to. You all are capable of big things. And that also will lead me into point 3 there. There's a real thing called imposter syndrome. Google it, look it up, watch YouTubes, read articles, and especially for introverts, because in engineering, I do talk to a lot of introverts. And imposter syndrome is kind of a self-doubt for some people, and I have it too, where you go into a situation where you might be expected to do something big, or you might have an opportunity to do something big and you don't know how to do it. And you question yourself and you say, who am I to do this? Those must be other special people that do these things. And you see your flaws and you feel like an imposter in the role. And I will let you all know, in almost every role I've had in my career, I've felt like an imposter when I joined that role. But then I suggest to people to use that anxiety of that to motivate you to overcome it, to reach out and learn, to spend some time in the evenings networking with the right people, reading books, figuring out a way to get through that. But just be aware that imposter syndrome is real, and that is something that can occur within yourselves where you will be stopping yourself from achieving your dreams. And so watch out for that. We touched on people a little bit earlier. Without people, brilliant ideas fail. And I see it time and time again where there are really elegant, very well engineered or technical methods to do things, but the people that are behind it either don't have the social skills, the networking, or the people integration to make it work. And you will see mediocre ideas get implemented because the people behind it understand people, networking, and how to be effective through people. And so if some of you take technical routes in your careers or your education, always remember that it underlies people. You have to have people. It's not that your math equation is the most brilliant or your thing you engineer is the most durable. You need people to make sure that those brilliant ideas take off. Another point is to control your narrative. And so all of you now, and this is probably something I didn't have to worry about as much when I graduated in 97 or when Pete graduated in 98. But there's a narrative about all of us now, whether it's through social media. By the way, be very limited on that. Or if you are, curate what you put out there, but control your narrative. Some of it can come back to bite you. But also, how are you perceived in your community? How are you perceived in your peers? Are you a person that has a good reputation or a poor reputation? You have an opportunity to choose the narrative that you put out there about yourself and to curate that, or at least to the best that you can. And so certainly do that. So for me, if I wouldn't have told you that I had a C- or a D+ in some classes, if I wouldn't have told you that it took me 7 years to complete my undergrad, if I wouldn't have told you some of these things, that wouldn't have been part of my narrative. You'd have been, wow, this guy's pretty cool. He works at Boeing. He does all these things. But I've had a lot of setbacks myself. And so you don't need to be visible about them. Certainly use your support group, but make sure that you curate your narrative to the positive. Pursue work-life balance. I see people that sometimes will work themselves to death, and I've done it in my career. At one point in time, and it's probably a story for another time, I'd worked about 3 months straight at my job before Boeing. I was working 12 to 16-hour days. I had 3 days off in 3 months, and the blood vessels in my eyes had popped. My mental processes were just fuzzy, and you can burn out. And so, and it doesn't happen like, a person when you're younger, you're coming out of high school, you have a lot of energy, like I could do this, I can grind 16-hour days. Well, eventually it catches up with you. It won't catch up with you in a week, but over a period of years, it takes a toll on you. And if you could really adjust and demand and expect your work-life balance early, make time for what really matters, you will have a lot more healthy long-term prospects. And lastly, stay humble and pay it forward. We all really step on the shoulders of giants that got us there. There's been a lot of wonderful people in the Carroll community I look up to and I have fond memories of. And whether it's Carroll or outside of Carroll, when you pay it forward, when you volunteer, when you help others, not only are you helping that situation, you're building your skills, you're building your social collateral, you're building your spiritual collateral, and you become so much more of a well-rounded person. I'm a big proponent of something called skills-based volunteerism. I did it a lot early in my career. You don't see it on the slides though, where I volunteered a lot in business and in law, working with people in impoverished communities. And it helped them, it made me feel great, and it built my skills. And so everybody wins in those scenarios.
Now, you defined engineering as a career and business as a career.
I'd say business is a set of decisions and practices. And so in business, you're operating things, you are making decisions, you're evaluating. It can be non-technical, but I know a lot of people in business that have technical backgrounds as well. That helps, it's not essential. And so for me, when I majored in finance at Ohio State, I just thought I wanted to major in business. I did junior achievement, which I hope is still a thing at Carroll. Was quite involved in the business classes with Mrs. Edwards. And I just wanted to major in business. Ohio State didn't have like a generic business degree, so finance was the closest thing. It also had numbers, which has helped me out through the rest of my career. So that was great, but it's a lot of like decisions and evaluations. Engineering is more technical, where you are either validating, designing, constructing different things. It doesn't have to be tangible things. It doesn't have to be the desk that's in front of you. It doesn't have to be the computer that's there. The systems engineering that I really specialized in is how things relate together. Those things could be pieces of a computer or an airplane, could be processes, could be how people work together. And so socioeconomic systems. And so systems is very broad in how all things kind of work together. But I probably had a very terrible definition between those there, but it's a great question. And so I don't want to say you know it when you see it, but I would say for engineering, it's more technical design, validation, experimental, innovative, where business is more decision operating type of background.
Could the students here that have LinkedIn profiles, could they connect with you?
Certainly, students, I encourage you to connect with me. If you ever have any questions, let me know. I'm certainly willing to answer questions, perspectives, thoughts that you may have. It was funny, a couple of years ago, I was I was curating my LinkedIn profile, and because it is a way of controlling your narrative. And either if you're trying to get a job or establish your presence in the industry, and I was working with a professional to do it. And I was having lunch with Mr. Williams there, and he says, "Why don't you have Carroll High School on your profile? You know, your career doesn't begin at Ohio State; it begins at Carroll." And I went, "Oh my goodness, he's right." And so you'll see Carroll High School on my LinkedIn profile today. But yeah, please do. I'd encourage you, when you see my profile, just look at it as something that has been carefully constructed, and think about how you would do your own as well. Because there are ways of marketing yourself. And when in future employers, college admissions people, whoever see that, how do you display yourself? What do you want to be known as? And so don't just think of it as, oh, wow, Jason's just filled out a ton of content, because it was more deliberate than that. And I would encourage all of you to look at different people's profiles, look at some famous people, look at some infamous people, and whatever you do, just make sure you have something highly polished that's out there. It's a reflection of yourself. Don't have a whole bunch of spelling errors and grammatical mistakes. Don't be taking a selfie, you know, at the mall as your profile picture. Actually have like a decent like photo up there, and really curate your image, because there's so many more people that are going to see that than you realize.
Are there any classes you took at Carroll that better prepared you for your career endeavors?
Oh my goodness. Also not a plant. Tell your mother hi, by the way. Let me pull this up here. Yeah, actually, I made a little slide about it. I tried to anticipate some questions, but I couldn't anticipate them all. So for me, there were so many great classes. A lot of the math and science classes were amazing. For me, Mr. Sobleski's public speaking class is something that has helped me throughout my career. I'm in a very technical quality engineering for future aircraft and R&D, research and development, basically. So there's a lot of technical parts of my job, but it's the communication with other leaders, communication with our workforce, communication with you today, and kind of ironing out my bad habits, emphasizing my good ones, voice control, all that. The public speaking lessons through the public speaking class is something that has carried through and has given me an advantage throughout my educational journey, and especially in my career journey. Another one, and this is me giving the family day speech when I was in Malaysia. Another one is, and I'm not sure if this class is still available, but Miss Downey, as she was known at the time, she had a class that was called Senior Seminar in Research and Expository Writing. To me, that was the hardest writing class I had ever taken. And I wound up eventually taking legal writing at what was at the time the #1 legal writing law school in the US. And this is a picture of me completing my MIT thesis. I've been published in Systems Engineering Journal. But the lessons that I learned at Carroll in that class affect the way that I write today. And in my thesis, in anything I've done in legal writing, etc., all of that poured right in. It gave me such a head start and allowed me to be proficient in technical writing as well. Junior achievement, or the business curriculum at Carroll, was instrumental. It fueled an interest in business. I had a proclivity toward science and engineering and math, but junior achievement and being able to work with people on products as an organization, getting a chance to be CEO of our junior achievement company, represent the company at different fairs and events. That was something that really propelled me. And lastly, I'd say pay it forward. I had a chance here at Carroll to really get that spirit of social justice and giving back, and it stayed with me forever. And again, that can be a tactical weapon too, because when you use it, you build your own skills, you really bolster your feelings, your heart, your social collateral, your spiritual collateral. And so for me, these are the 4 biggest takeaways. And it was hard to choose because there were so many great memories and moments there at Carroll. All right, I know we're coming up on time here. I don't know if it's chicken day or Crispitos, if you guys still have those, but I'd already be out the door by now. Anything else, folks?
Claire, do you have one final question that you want to?
Yeah, how would you suggest accurately searching for careers? Like, what's your advice when you're like really just starting out on like, what do I want to do? Where do I want to go? Where would you suggest starting?
You know, I had that same conversation with people, whether they're just starting or whether they've been in the workforce for 15 years. A lot of them don't know, and they're kind of afraid of limiting themselves by focusing too much in one area. And so for me, I really go, hey, why don't you list off the top 3 areas of interest? Focus on those first. It doesn't mean you cut off everything else, but kind of tailor your LinkedIn toward those, tailor your resume toward those, tailor your focus toward those. Talk to people. As a student, oh my gosh, you have so much access to people, because when an adult in the workforce comes to talk to me about something, I assume they want something. And that's because most of the time they do. When a student goes and talks to a professional, hey, do you mind if I talk to you about your career? Hey, would you mind if I set up a Zoom meeting? And you come from a place of innocence, I'll just be honest, and that a lot of people want to help that. And they're not assuming that you're there to ask them for a job. And so before you need it, build those connections. As you meet people in industry, whether they come to Carroll or something, you say, hey, would you mind if I set up a LinkedIn chat or whatever it is? Talk to them about themselves, ask some genuine questions, build those relationships. And when you learn about them, you might learn some endeavors that you want to try that you've never been exposed to. I didn't have exposure to a lot of things. I just did business because I did junior achievement. And if I were to have it do all over again, I probably would have took a different path to where I'm at today. I'm glad I did it. I kind of was all over the place, learned a lot of things. But the more that you can do that early networking, it's wonderful. And a lot of people are totally willing to talk to you. You just don't realize it.
Okay. Thank you so much. You were great. Thank you so much for joining us today. Mr. Williams, did you have anything else?
No, thank you,
to add?
Mr. Casebolt. And can everybody, can we just say thank you to Mr. Casebolt real quick?
Thank
Thank you, Mr. Casebolt. Sounds about like a group of teenagers. Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I look forward to seeing what you all do in your careers, especially if you link up with me on LinkedIn. Have a good one.
Sounds great. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Have a great day.